There is so much drama going on right now. I mean, Elon Musk quite literally just called Sam Altman an actual scammer in front of everyone. Things are getting completely out of control. Apple is suing OpenAI, and in this video, I want to talk about that court case. Why are they suing OpenAI? I mean, what have Sam Altman possibly done? What could that mean for the development of ChatGPT moving forward, given the fact that it's owned and operated by OpenAI? And how could this potentially impact the OpenAI IPO, which was set to happen this year? So, I mean, let's just start off by looking at this tweet from Elon Musk himself. I mean, almost 1 million views already. So at the time of this recording, it is Saturday. He posted this just a few hours ago, and he said, by this, he means scamming, right? Because he quoted Sam Altman saying, I'm doing this because I love it. And so openly, and in fact, publicly, saying that Sam Altman is an actual scammer. And it's crazy because it's coming from Elon Musk, who is a guy with a lot of influence. And so we've seen it, throughout history. His wording on social media can quite literally influence more than just personalities. I mean, it can cause companies to go down, right? It can cause stocks to go parabolic or sell off entirely. And so Elon calling Sam Altman a scammer publicly is just outrageous. But I really want to talk about this court case because honestly, it's insane, right? So Apple sues OpenAI over alleged theft of trade secrets. So again, Apple alleges a coordinated effort to obtain designs, supplier information, and manufacturing processes for OpenAI's consumer hardware push. We can also see here that more than 400 former Apple employees, right? So 400 people that previously worked at Apple now works for OpenAI, according to Apple. And again, OpenAI bought I/O products, right? So Apple products last year in a $6.5 billion deal. And OpenAI bought I/O products last year in a $6.5 billion deal. And again, tensions between Apple and OpenAI have simmered for literal months, but now it is making actual headlines. And what we just looked at, right, the coordinated effort to steal designs and manufacturing processes, more than 400 former Apple employees now working for OpenAI, and the fact that OpenAI bought I/O products last year is essentially the entire case just summed up into 3 sentences. Apple is essentially saying that OpenAI stole hardware knowledge. OpenAI has hired hundreds of previous Apple employees. In fact, 400 of people who used to work at Apple, again, now work for OpenAI. And OpenAI is now using that knowledge to build consumer hardware. Now, here's an important caveat, okay? Apple, right, opens new tab on Friday, sued OpenAI and 2 former employees. Now, this is important because Apple is not suing OpenAI because of its chatbot, again, ChatGPT. It is, in fact, suing because of OpenAI's move into consumer hardware. So again, the legal target here is not ChatGPT that we all use on a daily basis. No, it is in fact the device that is being built around that chatbot. Now, the complaint accuses OpenAI of orchestrating a broad effort to systematically acquire and exploit Apple's confidential information through former employees, recruiting practices, and supplier relationships to accelerate its push into the consumer hardware business. So again, if you don't understand, Apple assumes that the only reason why OpenAI has hired over 400 former Apple employees is to exploit Apple's confidential information, which they of course can if they have over 400 previous Apple, employees working for them. And this is where it gets serious, right? Because, Apple is not just saying that one employee took something. It is essentially accusing OpenAI of using over 400 different people to, again, accelerate, its hardware business. Now, here's a statement from OpenAI themselves. We have no interest in other companies' trade secrets. OpenAI said in a statement, we remain focused on building innovative technology that empowers people everywhere. And this right here is why this has been simmering for months, because OpenAI is actively denying this, right? They are not accepting what Apple is in fact accusing them of. And so none of this is proven yet, right? So it's all speculation, which given what we've just read, in my opinion, is fair enough coming from Apple. But even if OpenAI eventually wins this case, right, it can still create immense delays, legal cost, and a lot of uncertainty regarding its hardware plans. So this is in no shape or form good for the actual business. Now, the lawsuit sets up a battle over who will control future AI devices that may not use traditional apps or operating systems. Devices which, if successful, would direct consumer attention away from Apple's best-selling iPhone, and analysts believe that OpenAI is working on a phone or other device of its own. So we are in fact looking at Apple potentially seeing OpenAI as sort of a, competitor. And so this is, in my opinion, one of the most important lines of this entire article. It is not just a trade secret fight, right? It is quite literally a fight about who controls the next, revolutionary AI device. And so right now there's no confusion, right? Apple owns the iPhone, which is the dominant device, but OpenAI is trying to build something that could potentially, bypass the iPhone. Now, here's another quote. Apple sees OpenAI moving from partner to potential rival, while OpenAI is trying to reduce its dependence on the iPhone and build a direct relationship with consumers. Again, this was set by PP Foresight analyst Paolo Pescatore. Now, the thing is, right, they say, in case you don't know, Apple sees, OpenAI moving away from partner to potential rival because previously they were actual partners, right? They brought in ChatGPT into the iPhone because Siri was, behind, as we all know. But now, OpenAI is trying to build a direct relationship with consumers, which means Apple may no longer see OpenAI as their partner, but again, a potential rival or threat. And again, you can see right here, as I said earlier in this video, even if the allegations are not proven, the lawsuit could delay OpenAI's hardware ambitions and further weaken what is already becoming an increasingly fragile partnership. Now, here's the thing, right? OpenAI planned on, IPOing this year. And you can see here an article from Yahoo Finance earlier this month. ChatGPT OpenAI is headed for a $1 trillion IPO. I mean, that is a massive valuation. We just had the SpaceX IPO at, I believe, a $1.4 trillion valuation, which was the largest IPO in history. And this is pretty close. Now, the two former Apple employees named in the suit are Chang Li, and former senior system electrical engineer and former vice president of product design for iPhone and Apple Watch, Tang Yu Tan. Neither immediately responded to requests for a comment. And so Apple is not making any vague assumptions here, right? They're quite literally name dropping two previous Apple employees. Apple alleged that Li failed to return a company issued work laptop and later used an authentication bug to access Apple's internal network, downloading, quote, dozens of Apple's confidential hardware-related files. Now, this right here is what can be incredibly dangerous for a company like OpenAI if it turns out to be true. Because Apple is not just saying that previous employees, remembered stuff about their previous company and then told that stuff to its new employer. No, they are saying that they actively went in and downloaded stuff that they were legally not allowed to do. Now, the iPhone maker also claimed that OpenAI's hardware chief, Tan, had been, and I quote, methodically using Apple's confidential information to benefit OpenAI. Before his departure by emailing himself information about Apple suppliers and internal industry summaries, Tan worked on the iPhone for most of his 24-year tenure at Apple, according to his LinkedIn page. Now, this matters because consumer hardware is not just about design. It is, in fact, also about suppliers, manufacturing processes, materials, components, and so on. And that right there is the exact information which Apple is, of course, trying to protect, but also what they're accusing, OpenAI of essentially trying to steal. Now, Apple alleged that Tan encouraged Apple employees to bring parts from Apple to job interviews at OpenAI for show and tell sessions, citing an incident in its filing where one OpenAI job candidate allegedly said that he didn't even know we could take those from the office. Now, here's the thing. Hiring previous Apple employees or even hiring people that are already employed at Apple and making them leave to join your company is not illegal. But Apple is making the argument that OpenAI hired so much of the Apple hardware talent that the company literally had to make sure that none of the confidential, information came alongside them. This right here is, Apple's entire legal argument that OpenAI now employs people who were once entrusted with Apple's trade secrets, does not entitle OpenAI to use that information to jumpstart its hardware efforts. So, pretty much saying that you can in fact hire people legally, you just can't take the secret. Apple also alleged that OpenAI employees sought confidential information from Apple suppliers, at one point allegedly having one of those suppliers carry out what Apple called a secret metal phishing technique on the belief that OpenAI had Apple's permission to use that technique. Now, this is equally as important because now Apple is not only saying that OpenAI used previous Apple employees to get information, it's also saying that OpenAI used supplier relationships to gather the Apple manufacturing techniques. Now, Mark Lemley, a professor at Stanford Law School, said that Apple's complaint, and I quote, has the potential to be a very big case, but that some of what Apple alleges, such as OpenAI's hiring of hundreds of Apple employees, is not illegal in the state of California, where Silicon Valley sprang up in part thanks to the state laws that allows employees to leave for a competitor. Because, Silicon Valley is pretty much built upon people moving from company to company. Whoever offers, the most, and wherever there is the most amount of growth, employees, gravitate towards that. And there's a new opportunity and they go towards that. And so in Silicon Valley, this is not unheard of. But if Apple's claims that the employees took confidential documents with them and that OpenAI is, actually using those documents are true, well, then that is a problem for OpenAI. And so this is very important, right? Because if Apple can somehow prove the fact that previous employees took confidential items with them and that OpenAI actually used those, documents, well, then this can turn into something very, very big and not just some normal tech drama. No, I'm talking about very, very large court cases. And another law professor said that the case could become complex because most of the previous cases around AI and trade secrets have involved software rather than hardware. And so this suggests that this is not going to be a quick case. It's not going to be solved anytime soon. Lawsuits like this can get very, very detailed, and this can, severely impact OpenAI as a company and potentially also the development of ChatGPT, which is being used by hundreds of millions of people. But again, this entire court case is about OpenAI's hardware push and not about ChatGPT itself. So ChatGPT is most likely not going to just, disappear. The real risk and sort of worst case scenario for OpenAI is that their next platform gets, severely delayed. And ChatGPT can also, continue updating, I believe. The problem would be if OpenAI wants to do sort of a physical device for ChatGPT, because that is almost in direct competition with the iPhone. That could become a massive problem. And so if that's the case for OpenAI and that is what they were planning to do, well, then again, that could become, very, very hard. Now, there was actually something similar. I'm not saying the court case was similar, but there was some controversy regarding Facebook when they originally IPO'd. And I just want to showcase what happened to Meta on the day of IPO. So again, they IPO'd in May of 2012, and I believe about 100 days later, let's see. So about 109 days later, the stock was down 61%. Now, this happens because when there's controversy regarding a company on the date of IPO, investors are not willing to take on that additional risk. And so let's say that they are in fact going to follow through with this 2026 IPO. Well, then investors, again, they're not as confident in the IPO. They're not willing to allocate as much capital towards the IPO. And therefore, there's a strong chance it's going to look a lot like Meta. Now, we saw something similar with Google. There was also some legal controversy regarding Google when they went public in the year 2004, and they had an initial market valuation of approximately $23 billion, which means they were, shares were initially priced at $85 each. Now, the initial valuation for Google prior to the actual IPO was much higher than $23 billion. It was above $30 billion, and each share would have been worth over, $100 each if they had followed through with that. But because of the legal stuff that was going on prior to the IPO, it, got valued much, much lower. So again, overall, this is not good for a company like OpenAI, and it could in fact affect their IPO given what's going on with Apple. So ladies and gentlemen, that was it, right? That was why Apple decided to sue OpenAI and what could possibly happen in the future. Again, ChatGPT will likely continue to update just fine. OpenAI could face a lot of issues if they try to bring, ChatGPT into the physical AI sector. Their IPO could also be under a lot of pressure and potentially be valued a lot lower than the headline we're looking at here of, again, $1 trillion. And overall, this could turn into something much, much greater. But again, I hope you enjoyed, and let me know in the comment section down below what you believe about this. Do you think that OpenAI actually did that? Are you on Sam Altman's side, or are you siding with Apple? Again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. Again, it's free and it puts a smile on my face. I hope to see each and every one of you within our next video.